Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay. Again, my name is Jimmy. I'm an alcoholic, and it's always an honor to lead any meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, but especially today, my dear friend Joe McQuillan from Chicago.
Hi, I'm Joe, and I'm an alcoholic. And I guess there goes my anonymity, huh? Yeah, to 33 years. I'm really grateful to be here. This is amazing and a tad overwhelming, but very heartwarming, especially for the people in the rooms that I'm seeing here that I feel this amazing bond with. Jimmy, the Lean sisters, and my dear buddy Jimmy C. from Chicago, Jimmy Cohn from Chicago. Will Rogers says that good judgment is the result of experience, which is generally the result of bad judgment. And that's kind of my story. I never learned a lesson below the neck, and I was raised in a very loving but very dysfunctional Irish Catholic family. I was youngest of 10 kids. There were 10 kids because there was an alcoholic car wreck where my Uncle Gene killed my Aunt Doll, and my mom and dad took in the 5 kids and raised them as our own. I was born a month later and didn't know anything about it until about 6th grade when I found out. My sister Debbie knew about it when graduation time, when they had to give her birth certificate to go to college. So it was those kind of things that they did the best they could, but that wasn't probably the greatest secret to keep from us, right? Because there was always crazy stuff going on. And my family was all based on drinking. Despite the fact that in 1956, there was this car wreck, every celebration, every funeral, every wedding was based on alcohol. We had a refrigerator in the basement, and I didn't realize that everybody in the neighborhood didn't have a beer fridge in the basement. It was the old fridge that you didn't work anymore on top, but it still worked enough to keep beer in, and there were hockey pucks in the freezer and beer in the fridge. And everybody in this family had a job. My brother Paul took out the garbage. So Mom would yell, "Paulie, garbage!" And my job was bottles. "Joey, bottles!" So I grew up thinking it was like my middle name, that I was Joey Bottles. And even as a little kid, the returnable, 12-ounce bottles, I would stick my fingers in to take them downstairs in the returnable cases, and I would smell it, and I liked it. There was something very cool about it. Even as a little kid, I remember playing cowboys, and everybody would be out doing, OK Corral. I was pretending I was in a saloon with a juice glass, drinking Pepsi. I thought that was the best part of the cowboy movies, the saloons. And it never changed. I walked my old man would go in sometimes to cash a check or something in a tavern, and he was the hardest working, most wonderful guy. His nickname on the railroad was Iron Joe. He spent 40 years on the railroad. All of the boys worked on the railroad during college, all 5 of us. And the old man had a reputation bar none, but if he was home, he was drinking. And he was a tender, gentle, loving man. He never said a conversation to the time he died that didn't end with "I love you." So I was raised by a loving father. So this concept of God, when it comes into play, wasn't foreign to me. I was able to find a loving father. Wasn't the same way for my wife, whose father wasn't that kind of guy. So it was harder for her to embrace that. And my wife, of 28 years, yesterday we celebrated 20-year wedding anniversary, is 31 years sober. And it's an amazing. And to this day, my kids haven't seen me drink. We were sober, but the house was chaos, and it was all about alcohol. My sophomore year in college, and by the way, drinking was a problem from the beginning. Freshman year in high school, I was playing football, and the older boys were drinking, and I wanted to be with them, so I was drinking. And remember, you dump some beers, like you'd get a six-pack and be outside and you dump, because it's a lot of beer to drink at one time. That didn't last long. Pretty soon I was taking other guys' beer when they went to the bathroom, I loved it. It was like a duck to water, man. All of a sudden, I was no longer afraid to talk to the pretty girls, right? If I was under the influence, my fear was gone. My self-esteem was false, but it was solid. So I wanted more of it. And that's how I lived until I was 28 years old. Every decision I made was about drinking. Every choice I made was around drinking. Every trouble I ever got into, which was a lot, the common denominator when I finally tried to get sober was about drinking. And yet I kept doing it. In 1976, I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Now, we were a blue-collar family, and we weren't taking a flight down to Fort Lauderdale, so I took a 24-hour train trip with a buddy of mine, Bobby Marks, whose dad was a judge, and he could have flown, but he came with me. We almost got thrown out, like in Mississippi, by the train because they were so mad at us, because we were blacked out and breaking into the bar car and all the things. But I made it down to Florida and had like a day and a half of beach and sun, and I get a call that they finally ran me down because nobody knew. It was like we were all staying in different hotel rooms, right? There were 12 guys. My brother Bobby had hung himself. He had taken his life, he had hung himself, and I had to come home, right? And he left a message, he left a letter, and he had talked about being gay, and we didn't know it. We weren't the most aware people on the planet. But mostly I knew it was actually the alcohol. That was the demon that took him. That ran through my family for my entire life. My brother Billy, years later, I had been sober, and things were not going well for him, and he had been very successful. Vietnam hero, Marine Corps presidential appointee under Carter, but always had a drinking problem. And eventually he drank a whole lot, dropped my nephew off at the house, and drove his little sports car into a wall at 100 miles an hour, to take the pain away, So it wasn't a surprise that before I got sober, I tried to take my own life. It wasn't. I mean, the bottom was, my loving God was so amazing that he made my bottom so horrific that I wanted to die. And at the time, I thought, what a horrible thing. And now I think of what a gift it was. Because here are the things I wanted to hear from people of authority. It's got a lot of potential. Boys will be boys. He'll outgrow it. That meant I was getting off the hook, right? And everything, car chases, wrecks, So the drinking was bad. Nothing, different than anybody else has here. I remember waking up and reading a police report. And it's funny now. It wasn't really funny then. That made reference to high-speed pursuit and the vehicle was airborne, right? And it was like, oh boy, this one's going to leave a mark, And my brother Jerry, very successful guy, his best friend who grew up in our family, it was always people around our family, it was always a party, was a very big law firm in Buffalo, and so I always got off the hook, always got off the hook. I never paid a consequence, And at one point I tried to get sober, I had tried to take my life. I left a note, poetic. I wish I had it to this day. It was lovely. Well written, articulate. Chicks would have dug it. It was really sensitive. And I had a weight bench I was younger, and I had a weight bench, and so I did some reps, so when they found me, I looked good. And chugged some drinks, took a bunch of pills, and woke up with somebody pounding on the door. Somebody's pounding on the door because we were supposed to meet two girls at Murphy's Old Town Pub in Alexandria, Virginia, and we were late. And off I went, right? The show must go on. So there I am, trying to talk to a girl with your hand shaking, drinking a beer in a straw, because you just tried to kill yourself 8 hours earlier, Now, the truth of the matter is it's funny as hell. It's pathetic and sad and horrific, but it's my story. And I wouldn't change a minute of it. I wouldn't change a consequence of it. But that's everything at that point in my life. When I picked up a drink, something was gonna go bad, right? They say, first it's fun, then it's fun with consequences, and then it's just consequences. And at the end, it was always consequences. Always consequences. Sometimes big consequences, like airborne high-speed collisions, right, which are not good, and that's not on your resume. And sometimes just little ones, that you lied or told somebody something and they called you on it the next day. And you're like, in a blackout, like, what are you talking about? So, and that shame, and I got to tell you, the shame kept me drinking because I was ashamed. I was ashamed. Everybody else was doing fine, and my life was stagnant. The thing about the guys that I hung out with and grew up with and lived in South Buffalo with, some of them are dead and the rest of them are sober, right? So, and it's an amazing journey. I remember, this is kind of I remember drinking it was a pub we used to hang out with called Culhane's in South Buffalo. A bunch of us got thrown out of college, different colleges, different antics, right? But we all of our behavior caused us to be asked to leave. And so we were all living, working. And I remember sitting in a bar in South Buffalo, walking outside, a bar we all hung out in, and it was February, and it was snowing. And my buddy Terry the Wolf, who's sober 20 years now, was on a bicycle with a flat tire driving down the street drunk. And I had a revelation. The revelation wasn't stop drinking, it was we got to live closer to the bar. That everything went around drinking. Right? So around this time, I started figuring, I'm wet in the bed, they towed my car away, I couldn't afford to get it back, the phone's off, I'm being evicted, and it's like every other Thursday. I mean, this was not a really bad run for me, and I thought, this is a pathetic way to live. And then I tried to take my life. And I still drank for a little while, and then my sister said, and I talked about this yesterday, my sister, who I adore, who's on the other side now, she crossed over, she passed away about 3.5 months ago. And she was an angel for me. She provided a source of love that I could never replace. And to my son, who I'll talk about in a little bit. And she said she raised her kids on her own, went and got finished her college degree, got her master's, raised her kids. I worked for her for a while in D.C., and that's funny. I fear no man, but she scared the hell out of me because I'd show up late or drunk or disappeared, and I had to face her, and she scared the bejesus out of me. But she was the source of love, and finally she said to me, I buried one brother, which was Billy at the time, later Jerry. I buried one brother, it was Bobby at the time. And if you don't stop drinking, I want you to stay away from me and my kids. And you know something? I was about 26 years old, maybe 27 years old, and it was the first time that anybody held me accountable. She loved me enough to tell me that she wasn't going to accept my behavior anymore. And to this day, I tell you, she saved my life. I started trying to get sober right after then. Didn't take right away. In fact, the first year, I didn't want to be the guy to mow the lawn in the black socks, right? So I've got 33 years where a couple buddies that came in at 34 because they didn't do cocaine the first year, which was, it doesn't count. You don't get to put that on the scorecard, right? I just didn't want to be the square guy, right? I needed to do something. So I never did that many drugs on the outside, but I just didn't want to be that guy. But I got tired of going to meetings where other people were talking about clean and sober. And the girl, remember the woman from Wednesday from the South who would talk about, no smoking funny cigarettes, no putting powder up your nose. And I'm going, hey, lady, shut up. I'm an alcoholic. You shouldn't take this away from me. What else do I got, right? Well, I got tired of not fitting in, right? There's nothing worse for an alcoholic than not fitting in. So I decided to actually abstain, get sober, work some steps. And early on, believe it or not, the compulsion left. I couldn't stay sober for one day for at least 10 years. I remember one time I was going to stay sober for Lent. It was a good excuse to dry out, right? And that didn't work out. I was drinking the first day. So then I said, I won't drink Good Friday, right? But by 10 o'clock, I was at a bar called the St. Marie Inn. So at least it had a Christian, tone to it. Drink it. I couldn't stay sober for one day, and all of a sudden I've got 30 days sober, 60 days sober. And it was an amazing journey. And all of a sudden, all my friends, not all my friends, but most of my friends, who shared the same kind of life I did, a spiritual life. Now, this is when I started embracing the God thing. And people say, I got a problem with God. And it's like, dude, get over it, right? This is all about spiritual path and higher power. I think I got tricked into coming into recovery to meet my God, to find a path back to my Heavenly Father. And the only way to do that was was this. It wasn't going to work in church, wasn't going to work in Catholic schools, but it did work here because he went first. I did the first step, and then he removed the compulsion, and what a bargain that was, right? That was a bargain. So now we're about 15 years into sobriety. Not drinking. Problem was things were starting to work out pretty well. You know, in an industry I was kind of getting well known, was kind of up and coming. Started taking myself a little too seriously. And I started thinking that's what mattered. Prestige, money, position, right? So the loving God that had me do the high-speed pursuit with the vehicle airborne dropped an Acme safe on me. And what I was doing in this industry was going to be taken away, right? It was going to be taken away. And I looked and I thought, well, who am I now, right? Because this is who I became. And I found that it's hard to reach out to God because it's tough for one God to petition help from another. And I had made myself a God, right? I really thought a lot about myself. And all of a sudden, I'm melting, literally melting. Andy Rettenberg came to me and said, you scare me, you're melting, and you've got 15 years sober. And I ran back to him, and I went first. And I got sober at a place called the Mustard Seed. And in Matthew it says that all it takes is a mustard seed of faith. So I thought, I'm running back. And I would just do what I did and held on till I could get to another meeting, till I could do that and then get home to my kids, specifically my oldest son, just to be with them. And I felt this comfort and this love. And eventually, and by the way, it all blew up and it all worked out, right? It all worked out. It blew up, you know? And it really didn't change anything other than the fact that I re-embraced my spirituality with a far bigger intensity than I had originally. You know, and all of a sudden this was first. And I understood a third step for me wasn't on my recovery. See, what happened was I did a perfect third step on not drinking. But I handled the money, the relationships, the decisions, and they were all going there. And I was still staying dry. So it was at that point I decided I'm going to take this third step and apply it to everything. And a lot of you guys do that originally. I'm not that sharp a guy. It took me 15 years to figure out that the third step had to be everything in my life. And the spiritual being that we call God or Father or whatever name you put on it, because it's all good, has to be paramount, or I'm not going to survive. Or I'm going to do what I was doing back in the early 80s and end this, right? So I embraced this. I got to sobriety. Now remember, my wife's 31 years sober now, so at the time, you know, she'd been sober quite a while. I was sober. We had kids. You may not believe this, but there's something to this genetics, you know? So my kids are born with the same genes that I have and she has, which means alcohol is going to run through their system. So at 16, we sent my beautiful, beautiful boy, Christopher, to a boarding school based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous in Tucson. I'm on the board. It's called Imbalance Ranch Academy. He got sober, stayed on as a life coach. He graduated from there, stayed on as a life coach, worked with other kids. It was just amazing. And I felt I could check it off the list, right? We're over the hump. We got this one. And then he decided, Dad, I'm not sure I'm alcoholic, right? And I want to do college and bonfires and fraternities and all that stuff. And I was powerless. All I could do is do experience, strength, and hope. And he went back to drinking, and probably surprised it wasn't working out real well, right? And so in January of 2016, it was the last weekend they were all going back to college after Christmas vacation, and just kicking up their heels all week. You know, and like every parent here, you know, when you know where they are on New Year's Day, you're relieved, right? Because they've been out hooting it up and caused trouble. And I could only imagine the years I took off my mom and dad with my shenanigans, as Jimmy would call it, my shenanigans. So now I'm the same guy. I don't sleep a whole lot when my kids are out, right? And so we made it home, and they decided to go up to one of the boys' parents had a lake house in Lake Beulah, Wisconsin, about an hour away from Chicago, a little over. And we were kind of relieved it was the last hurrah, right? They were going to kick up their heels, drink too much. There was a dozen of them. We were kind of relieved because they're in this bucolic setting versus running around the streets of Chicago, right? So we were kind of relieved that they made this decision, this choice. And they all went up and went to a local pub, drank too much, kicked up their heels, came back to the place, continued to drink, do whatever goes along with that. And 4 of them decided to jump into a 3-man canoe at 3 o'clock in the morning and paddle out on an icy lake with Timberland boots untied and layered clothing, and none of them made it back. So I got a call. That said, Mr. McHugh, Christopher and a few of the boys are missing. So I got to be honest with you, I was a wild kid, so I assumed that I was going to drive up, either bail them out, find them in a boathouse with some co-ed, right? Some kind of shenanigans. And then halfway up, it's no longer a search, but a recovery that all 4 boys had drowned. So, did all the things you had to do, claiming bodies, bringing them home, arranging for funerals, arranging for receptions, all those burial plots, all those things. And at night, I'd get on my knees, as I always did, since I was sober, and said, God, thank you for my sobriety and for my family, but to be honest with you, I'm pissed off you took my kid. And I did this for 3 nights in a row. And the 4th night, I got in bed after reprimanding God, and I got an epiphany. I got a message from God that said, I didn't take your son. Your son's free will and recklessness caused him to cross early. I welcomed him home, right? But I didn't take him. I don't move you around like chess pieces, and I lost a son too. So it was at that moment that I knew God wasn't the protagonist punishing me for past offenses that I got away with. That God was the loving Father holding me up when I could barely get up myself. So the crazy thing is, at this point, my commitment to God was bigger, greater, larger, stronger than it was prior to my son joining him in heaven. And I know that he's with my family now. I know for a fact. I'm out here. I wrote a book about the experience, about the metaphysical, because we believe that. We're believers. We believe there's a higher power, or I wouldn't be here. I'd still be home cleaning up Jimmy's couch because I peed on it last night, which didn't happen, right? So I believe that there was a change in me. I'm a different guy when I stopped drinking, and I'm a different guy from when my son crossed over, right? But like alcoholism and recovery in AA, I got to give it away to keep it, right? So I've got to continue to do this and take one step ahead, one step forward every day, embracing this gift of alcoholism and this gift of a higher power, and knowing that someday I'll see him again and that we're all going there. And me, my plan is to go sober. So thank you very much. Okay.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom?
All right, so I guess we have a Q&A. Yes, sir.
So how did you go about writing the book about this experience?
That's a great question. The question, I'm sorry, you said that, but I have ADD, so you have to say it twice. Okay. So the question was, how did I go about writing the book? And I had no intention of writing a book, right? I started having some experiences. I went to mediums. I went to, I did a bunch of things because, by the way, I was 26 years in the car business. I wasn't a naive cat. I was pretty savvy. So I wanted to know if this was BS, mediums and afterlife and where we're going. I wanted to know it and cross it off. And if it was real, I wanted to pursue it. So I started pursuing it, started meeting with mediums. A year later, I started getting messages that I would dictate from him that I continue to get to this day, 3 o'clock in the morning. I wrote it down so that at some point, I'd be this old man sitting on a rocking chair on a porch reading these notes I kept. And then I got a message, literally, that said, you got to write a book, you got to help other people. The same way you help people in Alcoholics Anonymous with your experience, strength, and hope, You got to let parents know who've lost kids. Kathy is over here. I know that she lost a young man, Joey, and that you've got to share this experience too. And it goes hand in hand. My spirituality goes hand in hand with my recovery. So thank you. Yes?
You said you were mad at God.
Yeah.
You were angry. And how did that change? How did your behavior change once you came to terms with that? Were you angry at everybody else too?
No, that's a great question. And how did my behavior change because I was mad at God? I was mad at God because I was afraid that my behavior caused this. I didn't know any better. I didn't study metaphysics. I hadn't spent a lot of time studying the great histories of the world, or the great religions of the world. I was a dad making a living trying to get by, right? So I didn't know any better. That I was just mad at God. I really was afraid that I was responsible for my son's death. That's what it was. And so, like what I do to this day, because I'm such a flawed guy, when I'm afraid, I strike out. So I was mad at God. And this loving God, the same God that relieved the compulsion, let me know that, no, I didn't take him, pal. I didn't take him, I love him, I love you. So that started a whole new level of my commitment to God. So thank you. Yes?
Joe, my son died at 49 from cancer.
Yeah.
Dennis recovered son. How do you use that rule 62 as far as not taking yourself too damn seriously under these circumstances?
Well, it's that's a great question. His son died at 41, right? 49. George, 49. And how do I not take myself too seriously? Because none of us are getting out of here alive anyhow. It's probably easier for me because I've gotten all this input, dialogue that says, not only am I going, but I'm going to see him again. So what the frig do I have to worry about, right? He tells me all the time, lighten up, Pop. None of this really matters. So the bottom line is stuff that I thought was really important, and I got to feed the family. I got to write deals. I'm a bit of a deal junkie. I love deals, right? I got to feed the family. I work pretty hard all this weekend. Jimmy and I were taking calls and stuff because that's part of what I do. But the bottom line is at the end of the day, this is all kind of a dress rehearsal, really. And he actually gave me a message that said, Pop, what you're doing is boot camp. And where I'm at is a beach house on Maui. Lighten up, you're going. So, yes?
Hi, Joe, thank you. As a couple, as an AA couple, you and Sally.
Yes.
How did you support each other individually and collectively as a couple? Working the AA principles.
Through the grief?
Yes.
All right, so Shar wants to know how we got through, as a couple, this horrific situation. And the bottom line is we both had a faith, and we loved each other, but we grieved separately. Sally kind of folded the tents in and worked on, pictures and books and thank you cards, and I would run around in circles till I was too tired and fall asleep, right? But there was this common bond of adoring this boy that we both believed was on another side. She's very open to what I'm doing. She's had her own experiences, but that's her story. But she's had her own experience that validates that, yeah. And I've get messages from Chris that says, tell Mama, be nicer to Mama. I love her. Tell her she's the one, right? So I'm going to do whatever this kid tells me to do when it comes to loving his mom. So I've been fortunate enough to marry the woman that I adored and stayed married for 28 years. And we carried each other through this thing, and there's nobody I'd rather share this burden with than her. Thanks. Yes.
Hi, Joe. I'm Darlene. I'm an addict and alcoholic.
Hi, Dar.
Thanks.
One of the famous Lean sisters.
We got sober together.
Yes.
At the beginning of sobriety, there was a lot of camaraderie.
Yes.
And what is your advice to people that are new about hanging out with people?
What a great question.
And bowling or do whatever.
Great. Because Dar wants to know what I would tell. I'm an old man. I'm rounding third. I'm 62 years old, and I'm still real close to my friends who are sober. Right? We golf together. We hang out together. We support each other. My buddy came from Sarasota, and Alan's my oldest pal. We were buddies since 1971. A lot of y'all weren't even born yet, and and his wife died 15 years ago, and so we had the shared experiences. And he came for a golf outing. I do this charity outing to honor my son. in February. And he came out and he was meeting all my buddies. He goes, man, and they're all recovery guys, right? Your buddies are all guys. There's NFL football players, there's fund managers, there's, these are guys, but they talk about, their fears and their commitment and their family and their honesty. He goes, all my friends suck. So I would say, I don't know if he's here, Paul, a buddy of mine, I got sober, and all of a sudden this guy was hanging around me, and somebody said, go hang with him. And I was a couple months sober, so we would go to dance together, we'd go to meetings together, we would do everything. And sometimes that connection, that commitment, like Jimmy and his buddy got there, is the only thing that kept me sober early. Because I didn't want to go back and disappoint him, because he counted on me and he believed in me, right? So sometimes when drinking seemed like a good idea, I didn't, because I didn't want to let him down. I could have printed T-shirts growing up that said, I will let you down, because I wouldn't mean to. It wasn't my intention, but invariably I would, I promise, I'd let you down. A funny story, my niece got married 20 years ago or whatever in Boston, and said, Uncle Joey, can you say a prayer? Can you say grace? And I was honored. But I did say, it's kind of funny. You guys are asking me to say a prayer. In the old days, when I'd show up at a wedding, you'd pray that I didn't make it to the wedding, So, but yeah, I think community, just like right here, we're coming out to Jimmy to see you guys, right? This is the key. Sometimes you're not going to stay sober for yourself, but you can stay sober for that guy that carries you, carries you emotionally when you're broken. And I recommend that highly, highly. Yes?
What started your connection and pursuit of the metaphysical?
My son died and crossing over, honestly, and I wasn't ready to accept the world devoid of this boy. Okay, the question was, what started this journey about the metaphysical? 15 years on some flight of fancy, I showed up in a medium. I just wanted to see, and it was pretty mundane. There wasn't a whole lot going on there. But at the end, she said, your dad's here. And this is 2000. This is before any Google searches or anything. And my dad wasn't a famous guy. He was a blue-collar guy from Buffalo, New York. He said, your dad's here, and he's showing me a caboose, and he's telling me railroad, that you would know what that means. And it was. We were a railroad family. I got a Canadian Pacific railroad lantern in my bookcase that I probably should send him a check for from a long time ago. I believe that if your dad's a lawyer, you're a lawyer's family. Or your mom's an agent, you're an agent's family. Every family has cultures. Ours was railroad. So he sent me this, and all it was an affirmation. The old man, Iron Joe, never talked much, right? Unlike his son. Iron Joe never talked much. But all he was telling me, he was there. That's it. No secrets to the universe. No, here's the lottery number. That he was there. I filed that away because it was like, wow, that's cool, right? I filed that away 15 years, 16 years later when I needed it. I had recall and started that journey. That's what it was. What happened? God put that in my life 15 years before, and I had no idea why until I needed it. Then it was revealed. Yes? Yes, yeah, and the question was, knowing, being alcoholic, being in recovery, my son deciding to pick up the mantle of the McQuillan alcoholic journey, did I try to intervene? Did we do it? Yeah, at one point he came back, we sent him to the retreat in St. Paul for 30 days. I went up to see him, and we tried to interrupt it. The bottom line is, guys, their bottom is their bottom. You could do your best. We can try. The last conversation actually I had with him was, buddy, you got to do something about this. And he said, I know, Dad. I'm not going to go back to treatment because I know what I need to do. And I know I got to get some, I know I need to change. That was the last conversation I had with him. So, but yes, I did. And I tell you what, I don't know how easily I could have lived myself if I didn't do that before he went. I did it with love in my heart. And I knew that it may catch and may not, but I needed to throw it out there. And I would never stop loving him, but I certainly would have approved of it a lot more if he wasn't drinking, right? Yes?
Can you tell us about your most memorable amends?
Amends?
Amends, yeah.
That's a great question. All right, so I got these great men in my life. That's a phenomenal question. I want to know what were the memorable amends, right? How's that? Most memorable. Can I use 2 or is it got to be 1? There's a lot of friggin' rules here for an alcoholic, I got to tell you. I quit. And 2's good. All right. So remember, I'm the youngest of 10 kids who was never accountable for anything. So when I was making amends, right, and I had these 2 wonderful men, both alcoholic, by the way, both loving fathers, dedicated guys, but they just had the gene, right? My dad and my oldest brother, Jerry, who was like another dad to me. And so when it was time to make amends to, in my program, I wrote a letter to the old man, and I said, or maybe I called him. I called him because he sent me a letter back. And I said, Dad, I need to make amends, financial. They've been bailing me out forever, right? I need to make amends. He goes, you know what, pal, that's water over the bridge, under the bridge, over to the dam. We're good. I said, Dad, I need to do this for me or I'll never feel like a man. So 3 days later, this is, in the late 80s, right? 3 days later, I get an envelope with Xerox copies of a notebook of everything from 1975. I was like, fuck, do we have to be this specific, And I did. And something about that amends? God, that's a wonderful question. Thank you. And about that amends is I was able to make it, finish it before he died. Continued to send money to my mom under the guise of, I'm still paying back with the old man. And I worked out. And when he died, I felt like a man instead of a weasel, right? And my brother Jerry, similarly, who I just adored, just wonderful guy, sweet, tough as nails, good man. And I said to Jerry, I need to make amends. And he said, yeah, no big deal. I'm just glad you're sober. I said, no, I need to do this for me. He said, all right. And he said, what do you think? I said, let's pick a number. I have no idea. Let's pick a number. I said, all right. How about 500? He said, pick a higher number. So the bottom line is these guys were saying to me, okay, you want to do this sport, we can do this, but we're going to do it the right way. And once again, when he died, and even at the end, toward the end of, forever, him and I we'd become not brothers again, and almost peers. He was 15 years older than me, but he accepted me as no longer his weasel, troublemaking younger brother that he loved, but his peer. And I knew that there was an acceptance. We were at a wedding in Florida sometime, and there was a bunch of family members around a table, and he was very happy of my success. Nobody was really betting on Uncle Joey, I can tell you right now. So he was very happy of my success. So we had 10, 15 family members, nieces, nephews, cousins, whatever, all at this dinner after, before a wedding, after whatever. And Jerry looked at me and he went like this, you and me. Means the bill's coming to us, we're splitting it. I was so grateful. It was like this giant accepted me as one of theirs. I was so grateful. So we were very, very close up to the time that he crossed over. And he sent, I've had messages from him through mediums, that he's over there. And you know what? And when it's time to cross, they're all going to be there. I had a medium say twice that one guy said, your mom and dad are here, and they're really proud of you, and really, really proud of you, but it appears that you've had some kind of success in your life, and they're kind of shocked. It's like, Jesus. And it also says, your parents come together for events, but they don't hang out over here. 3 different mediums say that. It's like, why do people keep rubbing that in? They weren't a great match. What can I tell you? But that's not true. They were wonderful, but those are the things. So, but I know they're there, and our loved ones, doesn't have to be kids, our loved ones are somewhere. And if there's a higher power that relieved that bondage, he's there. You got to figure they're with him, right? So sign me up. And I'm not ready to go. I've got work to do. But if God touched me on the shoulder and had said, sport, time's over, time to go, I've lived this life beyond my wildest dreams. I should have died in a car wreck or in a pissy mattress in a cheap hotel. Yet that's not what he had plans for me. You know, that was my plan. His plan was a little better. Yes.
What's the difference between the AA meetings in Chicago and West Los Angeles?
Great question. What are the difference between the AA meetings in Chicago and West Los Angeles? This is more ceremonial, right? This is a celebration. This is an event, right? I go to a lot of meetings on the way home from work or before I go to work, right? And there's something we do called turbo meetings, that it's a 2-minute lead, 1-minute share, you know, or you get beat up. So there's something very special about this celebration that would want me, if I was a newcomer, to come back again, right? So I think that's it. The ceremony and the celebration makes it very, very special. Yes. Hi.
Thank you for your share. It was really amazing. Do you have other children?
I do. I have 2 other children. My daughter graduated from Marquette, and she's in India now. She graduated in education. She's in India now getting certified as a yoga instructor. That was her graduation present. My wife went over. Now, my wife likes Four Seasons hotels and Starbucks, but she spent 10 days on a service trip with her initially in India. And then she came home, and Caroline is spending another couple weeks up there. I can't wait for her to come home. I miss her. But she's there. And by the way, one of the reasons I was grateful about going to India and, you know, and abstaining, you know, and culturally over there is because she needs to look at her drinking too. You know, oh yeah. And William is 19, had a really abysmal semester at Boulder, you know, and so that didn't last long. And he is selling cars at a buddy of mine's Jeep Chrysler dealership, doing fine, self-esteem's up, golfing with some of Christopher's fraternity brothers who kind of took him in as a little brother to them, you know, golfing with them, now running up my tab at the golf club, and I'm delighted with it, you know. But once again, save a suit for Will, because it won't be all that long till, because now he's got money and a disease, right? So save a seat for him. He'll be here, Jimmy. All right, we have we got time for one last question. Yes.
How do you practice being of service?
Here, you know, how do I practice service? I don't like being a sponsor. I do it, right? But I love newcomers. You know, I love newcomers. I love kids. I'm on this Inbalance Ranch Academy that saved my son's life. Albeit a few years later, he crossed over, but saved my son's life. And I'm on the board. They come up for the golf outing. We're friends. I spoke at they have an annual fundraiser. I do a golf outing for them. But my favorite part of that is I drive an hour and a half to the ranch. It's literally a ranch. These kids are at a ranch environment, and I go to the ranch, it's just me and 45 boys, right? And some of the staff, but they're kids too. And so I walked in this year, and it was a new crop. You know, they just dedicated a student housing, a bunkhouse, and they call it McQuillan Manor for my son. And they loved him. He was a bit of a legend out there, and they loved him. And so it was me and 45 of them, and when I got there, it was all, you know, they're all, you know, 12 to 18 years old, right? Mostly 12 to 17. And they're all like, yeah, what is this, you know, brush-cutted jerk-off have to tell me, you know? But at the end, it was all hugs and after the stories, and I made all of them share, right? It was my hour, right? You know, it's like, well, I don't feel like sharing. I said, I don't care what you feel like. Tell me what's going on, you know? And he did, and they did. And it was just tremendous. And I love guys like Jimmy, you know, who's a miracle, who was one of Christopher's best friends. Together, these two guys couldn't make a good decision if you put a gun to their heads. And Jimmy's 4+ years sober, and I love him like a son. And he came out here to support me, and I couldn't be more grateful. So that's what I do. I still speak. I'll still serve. I like young newcomers. You know, I mean, I still remember the first step. I remember thinking, get me out of this one, and I'll behave. Yeah. Remember that one? Yeah. But I still remember that. But I've been given the gift of desperation. I can recall the hotel room when I couldn't find the car, or when I got arrested in a southern state, and I was with a union at the time. I'm supposed to be organizing these people, and the cops arrest me. It's like, yeah, that's not going to be good for the old career, is it? And so I remember those desperation, and I guess I get to share that with these kids, and they grasp it, you know. And life doesn't have to be that way anymore. So I'm real grateful to be able to do some service when I fit it in between golf and work occasionally. I'm kidding. So now what? That's it? We done? No song? No music? Jimmy got a piano player. I didn't get it.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.